Object shows. I remember the first time ever watching it for the first time, and funny enough, it came from the Italian dub of the first season of BFDI made by BFDI Dubita 23, which ironically is the same voice actor of Yin Yang to this day, which is very funny to think about.
Oh no, è troppo tardi! Ma che peccato! Well, trust us, we can. Yin is the darker half, I'm the lighter half. It just feels so wrong.
But anyway, I remember first finding this weird version of Total Drama a long time ago, and loving it. The episodes, although sometimes weird, were a new thing that I started liking back when I was a small little boy. I remember then watching Inanimate Insanity, which was kinda similar to BFDI, but it seemed slightly better in terms of consistency, and the season finale was actually pretty suspenseful for me when I first watched it. Then there was Object Overload, which was also kinda similar to BFDI, and then Object Havoc, and then Object Mayhem, and then Brawl of the Object, and then Non-Existent Living, and then... Yeah, those were good times, and most of the Object shows I have laid my eyes upon weren't, or aren't, even bad at all. I respect all those people who are able to make products like these and actually doing it. Thing is, in the most recent years, I started noticing something. Something weird was happening to me. I was finding Object shows boring. To this day I still don't have a clear reason on why I started drifting away from this community, whether it would be that there's so many small kids in this community, or that people keep asking me to make more videos related to Object shows, or the fact that I found things that I personally like more than the OSC. But one thing was clear to me. Most Object shows didn't do anything different. Sure, the fact that it's a quote-unquote object show means that it has to be those two things, so it's fair that not many would try to change that in some way. But yeah, all these shows have one thing in common, and it's the fact that it's always a competition show. Sometimes it would be viewer voting based, sometimes the characters themselves got to decide who to eliminate, but despite that, they were all just the same thing that BFDI, the original, was. So that got me thinking, why don't people try to change this? Is it that hard to come up with something to spice things up? Then I tried that myself and realized that yes, it is hard. So my hope for Object shows was kinda fading away. As time passed, I started doing less and less Object show content, as I was beginning to feel even annoyed at the bare sight or mention of Object shows, and not to mention all those people wanting me to get back to that type of content and people missing the old me. That may have helped the fact that, even now, when someone talks about this community, I try to ignore it. That is, until... One is a show that got its first episode uploaded back in 2020, and weirdly enough, I didn't check it out when it first came out. However, after some time I was able to give it a watch, and after watching it all, I came to realize, holy shit, this is amazing. At first I didn't understand why I love this so much. I thought I was losing interest in Object shows. Why was I so interested in this? Then I thought about it, and realized that, unlike other Object shows, one spiced the basic formula up. This wasn't a normal Object show. Other shows would start with the cast being like bored and being friends to one another already, and then the host would show up and recruit them for their show. Well, what does one do? Well, first off, we don't even begin like I just said so. Instead we live in something that seems to be an actual civil world, that looks like our own world. Now I don't think I ever mentioned this, but I also really love modern objects, mostly because it just throws the whole Object show formula outside the window, and makes it look like a slice of life type of situation. This may be because I sometimes prefer calmer shows instead of fast-paced ones. Now I'm bringing this up just to say that because of this, one already got my attention by starting the first episode with what seems to be a society of living beings. Instead of just grass. People. Compete.
Well, there you have it, folks. This is...
Now this isn't obviously the only thing that made me love this show. Open Source Object also features a society of living beings, but that show isn't something I particularly love because, despite the neat idea to make the show a big animation collab and also the society detail, It's still an object show and doesn't do anything too interesting with that. In any case, what else does one have that makes me love it so much? Well, another thing that the show does is the fact that the contestants are being held hostage. The main plot of the show isn't even the actual show, but it's rather all these people, coming from different worlds and universes, being trapped in this weird world, and trying to find a way to escape and get back to their lives. During all these episodes you can actually feel the fear in these poor people's eyes. As the first episode, teasers and other things show, the first group to be spawned in this world were all living their own lives, maybe enjoying them, maybe not. And all of a sudden, they got teleported in this new place, without any idea of what's happening, and without anyone they know. Now, as you could probably guess, that's not something that usually happens in object shows. The contestants in other shows would all be happy to compete, or at the very least, they'd be willing to compete. Meanwhile, one feels like some sort of prison to those who end up in here, which is a very unique take on the object show formula. Another thing that the show does very good is connecting other things that the creator, Cheesy HFJ, made with one. The biggest example is the contestant Circle, who is a character from Battle for Circle, which is another show created by Cheesy. The connection between Battle for Circle and One is a pretty clever one. In episode 13 of Battle for Circle, there was a moment where our Circle, aka the one from One, was running away from all the other circles, and then in one moment, our Circle just disappeared from everyone else's sight.
You'd think for a vast wasteland like this you would see him, but I can't see him.
Now this was the end for this Circle for a while, but then once episode 3 was released, it was revealed that our Circle disappeared because he was just teleported to the show. And the fact that even the creator confirmed this to have been planned from the start is incredible. There's a few other connections like these in the show, whether it's from teasers, or actual episodes. I made a few videos about all these clever connections on my channel, so if you want to check it out, I'll leave a link to them in the description. Now what about the cast of the show? You can have a great idea, but you can't put that idea in action if you don't have the right characters, so what kind of people does one have? Well, if we're talking about the first group, then this is the group that is the most self-aware of the situation, tomato excluded. The first group do in fact come from the society world that I talked about earlier. I also need to add that the fact that, despite being certain objects, they have actual human names, makes these characters feel even more relatable and likable. We have characters like Liam, who's also known as Backpack, Taylor, also known as Magazine, and Moldy, also known as Charlotte. Last thing to add about these characters is that, out of the three groups, these guys actually seem to be talking and acting like actual people. A perfect example about this is the whole conversation that Charlotte, aka Moldy, had with her friend, Parker. I was actually rewatching One before making this video with a very close friend, and this was the first time for him to check One, or object shows at all. And after episode 5 ended, he said that, during that whole argument, he forgot he was even watching an object show, due to how realistic arguments like these happen, and how there isn't really someone in the wrong, and it's more like a gray area. Now take object shows, where a nice character would end up screwing up the challenge, that a mean character would point that out, and then said mean character would be voted off the next episode because oh what tragedy would it be if a nice character were to get out. Yeah. Now about the second group of characters, these are the characters that you'd usually see in object shows. These guys are objects, serve their purpose as objects, but also have the ability to talk. Other than the metaphor that these guys represent what you would usually see in object shows, like how their names are their object name.
Wait, hold on. You have a name?
You don't?
What? Of course not. That's a human thing.
I'm sorry, a what?
There isn't really much to say about this group in particular, but they do eventually get to develop a personality. Most, anyway. Finally, we now move to the final group of characters, the third wave if you will. Now these are the weirdest ones yet, each one of these guys having some sort of weird thing going for them. We have Adam, who's an Atom. Folder, who's a creepy 3D folder who acts like an actual bot giving random and vague responses to everyone. The previously mentioned Circle, Abstracty, who is capable of copying, or even mocking, anyone that they approach. Texty, who's literally a text box. And finally, Stone, who knows everything that has ever happened and will happen in the universe. Now these characters are all amazing in terms of creativity, since having ideas like a 3D computer assistant folder or a literal text box is clearly not what you usually see in object shows. But there's some of these characters who have just a little bit more of depth into them. We already discussed how Circle was in another show before one. So let's talk about Stone for example. Stone might be the most interesting out of this entire group, as he tried to warn everyone multiple times about the bigger picture of this show. And after seeing the season 1 finale, you gotta realize that Stone really thought about everything, from warning everyone about the real nature of the show, to even writing down some of the characters' addresses. Last but not least, we have the host of the show, Ari. Ari at first seems to be a chill person, but once the first group questions how Ari was able to just teleport them in this world, things start to get kinda creepy. You'll often see him not care about anyone's feelings, and just get the show going, and not even answering questions the contestants might have. He's clearly one of the main keys of the show, and the fact that we barely know anything about him, despite being here since the very first episode, is very weird to think about. We have right next to zero ideas on who this Ari guy is, how he's able to teleport people from worlds and universes so easily, how he's capable of spawning any objects without any problem, and also that 7-month absence during episode 8. More stuff is going to be revealed in season 2, so I hope that we'll be able to find out who Ari really is. Last thing I want to talk about is this popular theory that fans have came up with, and that is the eyes theory. Allow me to explain. By the end of episode 4, during the end credits, you can see that only Stone has visible eyes, and due to him knowing things that the other contestants don't, this made people to believe that maybe Stone does know something that maybe not even we do. By the time episode 5's end credits arrive, and also after Soda Bottle and Backpack learn that the votes are fake, they also appear to have eyes during the end credits. This can also be seen in episode 6, after almost drowning, Backpack went off a very weird dream, and when the end credits arrive, he's now the only one to have eyes, which means he now knows something that no one else knows. Now do I believe this theory? To be honest, yeah, I really think that these eyes during the end credits aren't made without a reason, and I feel like this is a good theory that may even be correct, but we can't know for sure. Now there's other things that I could talk about, like how the plane, aka the world where one takes place works. Or I could explore other theories, like who that mysterious toothpaste person is, but I think I said enough to convince you that one is a good show at the very least, and a masterpiece at most. The amount of details hidden in the episodes, and even outside of episodes, plus the very realistic interactions of these characters, and also the many mysteries this show has. These are all things that object shows barely have anymore. You always feel like how things are gonna turn out when you're watching yet another object show. Meanwhile, one always keeps you focused and entertained from beginning to end. With season 2 already started with episode 10, and episode 11 coming out in 3 days, as the time of writing this, I can only remain excited at what one holds during this summer. And just to say how much one is such an amazing show, I think that I may work on a small series on my channel. I don't want to say too much about it, but I want to make this 5 or 6 episode series focused on how this white void works in this universe, since I did confirm that I, as in APOY the character, live in this white void. If I do end up making this small series after my high school final exams, then I'm gonna try my best to make it work kinda like one, with an eerie vibe, but also chill vibes from time to time. But anyway, I highly recommend you checking out one, or to anyone you know that might be interested in this, because this show is something that's probably never gonna happen again in the OSC. It truly is, a golden egg that this community laid out.